hi, I didn't see you there. I was just reading some fine literature about Daikatana in E1M1 Magazine, the world's first old-school shooter mag. The kind folks over at E1M1 Magazine were nice enough to send me a copy and were asking for my thoughts, so I just thought that I would make a video about it. This is the first time I've ever done a magazine review before, something completely different, so hopefully it goes well. Once again, just to be completely transparent, I did receive this magazine for free, so keep that in mind as I'm talking about it. Now you might be thinking, a paper magazine in 2021? That's weird, and yeah, it kind of is, but E1M1 isn't your average gaming magazine. It's a magazine that focuses solely on retro and indie first-person shooters. It was crowdfunded by fans, the articles are written by fans, and the magazine is run by fans of the genre. And let's be honest, fans of boomer shooters aren't normal. We play games that look like they came out 30 years ago, we spend thousands of dollars on high-end gaming PCs just to play Doom, which can run on a literal potato.
Ladies and gentlemen, we have Doom running on potatoes. Oh.
We find enjoyment in niche retro hobbies and physical media. We buy big box physical editions of games that we can very easily find digital copies of for much cheaper, and having a tangible magazine to hold appeals to that same feeling. I actually have been collecting magazines for years. I got Nintendo Power growing up, starting with the Pokemon Emerald issue going all the way through until Nintendo Power ceased printing. I also got Game Informer for many years. With the advent of the internet, reading through these magazines became a little less and less appealing. By the time the magazines got to you, the articles were already old news. Social media moves fast, and information can be available basically as soon as it's known. But I still look forward to the magazines arriving month after month, especially to see what game made it onto the cover and to see the cool artwork. One thing I think magazines can actually do better than the internet can is that it can get you to read about something that you might not normally read about. Social media is very tailored to your tastes. I actually rarely go on a website like IGN and just click around on the articles. I follow them on Facebook, and then I'll click on the articles that they share that already interest me. I don't really read about games that lay outside of my sphere. In a magazine, it typically isn't so specifically tailored, so when you're reading through it, it's a lot more likely you'll find a game that you've never heard of before or had little interest in before, leading you to learn more about it. Anyways, E1M1 Magazine is the world's first old-school shooter mag. Like I said, it has a heavy emphasis on retro and indie shooters. At first glance, I was already really into this magazine. It's named after the common phrasing for the first level in Doom, E1M1. It's written in Doom's font. The More Inside is also written in Doom's font. We have this awesome drawing of the upcoming game Celico, which is a game I'm really excited for. It's a game running off the GZ Doom engine that blends gameplay elements of classic boomer shooters and tactical shooters like Fear into something that just looks like a blast to play. And they also mention some of the other games that will be on the inside, many of which I have heard of or played, being a big FPS fan, and some that I've actually never heard of before. The back of the magazine is a big advertisement for the game Kerr, which has been on my wish list for a while, but I just haven't gotten around to playing yet. Opening it up, we have this great drawing of Duke Nukem reading a copy of E1M1 with Dusk on the cover. There are several cool drawings throughout this magazine, another of Duke, one of Doom Guy, one of Crash, and one of Turok. I really like seeing fan art appear here as it makes the magazine feel a little more connected with the fan audience that would be buying it. Flipping through E1M1 feels like total fan service. I found myself constantly thinking, oh hell yeah, Intrude, Heat On, that's awesome. I never really heard of this, but it looks so cool. Oh, this has been on my wish list forever, I need to buy that. I also follow a lot of these indie creatives on Twitter, so it was really fun seeing their works appear in a magazine like this. E1M1 is broken up into multiple sections. Previews, this section of course looks at upcoming games. Some of these I've heard of, like Sulaco, Cultic, and Splice, but I haven't heard of the rest of these, which is awesome, because now I learned of some new games to keep an eye on. I like that the magazine doesn't only highlight the big name games, and that's what sets it apart from something like IGN or Game Informer to me. I would have never heard of these games following those sites. Games like REM, which features this really cool green-toned Game Boy look to it, or Possessed, which follows more along the lines of Hexen and Heretic, featuring magic instead of guns, which is something that I always enjoy as something different. Or Bitter, which is described as drawing inspiration from Turok, Serious Sam, Power Slave, and even a little bit of Donkey Kong Country, which is just awesome. I like being able to flip to the next page and see a new game that I've never heard of before. The next section showcases mods. Modding is such a huge part of the boomer shooter community. These are as integral to the scene as the games themselves. Doom, Quake, Half-Life, etc. still all have a booming mod scene. Many great games originated as mods to these games, and many brand new games are presented as total conversions themselves. I really like seeing a mod section here. I like that the mods they showcase are from a bunch of different games too. They aren't just from Doom or Half-Life. They showcased Dawn of Darkness for Quake 2, Trauma Therapy for Blood, and even a Descent 3 mod called Omens. The modding section introduces E1M1's grading scale, stars out of 5, as well. There are quite a few reviewers writing, but I feel like they are all pretty fair and thorough in their analysis. And they aren't afraid to give negative reviews too, which I appreciate because I feel like other gaming sites just kind of give everything the same score. Like everything is a 7 or 8 out of 10 kind of thing. There are a lot of 4s and 5s, but there's also a good number of 1s and 2s on here too. The next section is rail shooters. There's only one game in here, but I appreciate its inclusion because rail shooters are a bit different than the Doom and Quake clones we usually see in the retro shooter discussion, but there's still an audience and interest in rail shooters, and technically they are a retro shooter genre. The next section is retro, where reviewers look back at older games and give their thoughts playing them today. It's interesting to see what games hold up. For example, Metroid Prime still scored positively 19 years after its release. I liked the Daikatana review a lot too. Daikatana is infamous at this point for being John Romero's biggest flop, garnering a lot of negativity at the time of release, and even being the punching bag for a lot of YouTubers like JonTron for the longest time. As time has gone on, players have tried to fix the issues with Daikatana, and many people believe that the Fan 1.3 patch makes the game a little more worthwhile. And Captain Caleb Rock actually reviewed the game using the patch to give his thoughts as players today would play it to have the best experience. Fan patches and mods can go a long way in making a much better experience for old games, and I appreciate that they reviewed the game as most people would want to play it today, instead of just playing the original version and repeating the same criticisms that the game has had for 30 years. Like with the other sections, there are games I've heard of and some that I haven't. They even reviewed Kiss Psycho Circus, which is pretty cool. One review that stuck out to me was the Fortress of Dr Radekai, which they gave a 6 out of 5 stars and basically described it as being terrible, but worth playing because of how baffling its design can be at times. And as a big fan of schlocky B-movies, the video game equivalent of a so bad it's good kind of thing like Birdemic sounds kind of appealing to me. The next section is reviews, which deals with reviewing new games. We see games like Heat on Bloodright, Vomitorium, Intrude, and Crimson Metal. Again, like the other sections, some of these I have played and heard of, and others I haven't. Before I get into the last couple sections of the magazine, I just want to discuss some of what I think are the strengths of E1M1 Magazine as a source of news and information. First off, the magazine being completely about first-person shooters is a huge strength. You already know what the magazine is going to be about, and it definitely appeals to someone like me who plays primarily first-person shooters. Every article, every game mentioned is going to be relevant to my interests, and that makes it more appealing to read through. That said, they don't just stick to the biggest games. They showcase a lot of smaller indie games that I have never heard of before, and I think that that's great. Also, all of the reviewers and writers are retro FPS fans. They regularly reference other games, and it gives them a bit more authority, at least to me. You know that they like retro FPS, and you know that they know what to look for in a retro FPS, so their thoughts should be pretty trustworthy about the subject. Both of these things benefit the reviews, as they can write things like, "It controls like any other retro-style shooter," or keep reviews relatively brief because we already understand what's going on, and it doesn't take away from the review as a whole. The last couple sections are features, which includes things like game jam submissions and previews for early access titles. I like that they don't try to review early access games because they are obviously works in progress, and the final product could end up being something completely different than the early access build. Though I still like that they talk about these games because it gives me more games to keep an eye on, and because early access has become such an integral part to the indie gaming release. I also found the Game Jam article to be really funny, because this month's Game Jam required devs to use the Raycaster Game Maker engine, and if you've seen some of my Wolfenstein Clones videos, you'll know that I have played a handful of games that use that engine, and most of them have crippling issues. It's apparently not a very good engine, which E1M1 recognized and basically gives the challenge to make a good game with a bad engine, and I think that that is brilliant. Their next Games Jam is asking for things with a unique setting, no hell theme or brown military environment, which I also think is brilliant, because the setting and themes for some boomer shooters have gotten really stale as of late. The interviews at the end were fun to read through too, presented in a typical question-and-answer kind of format. One last thing I want to point out in this magazine were the ads. They were all ads for upcoming indie FPS games or their developers, but one ad stuck out to me, an ad for Zoom Platform. Zoom Platform is a really underrated digital game store. All of the games are DRM free, there's no launcher so you can just launch the games directly, and it's the only store where you can still buy Duke Nukem 3D's Atomic Edition. So if you're looking for a version of Duke Nukem 3D other than the World Tour Edition, Zoom Platform is your place. So yeah, overall I really like the presentation of E1M1 Magazine. It's full of things to check out and definitely caters to the hardcore retro FPS fan. If you like collecting physical media and miss getting actual magazines sent to your door, it's definitely something to look into. Hope you enjoyed this video. I've never reviewed a magazine before, so it's something different. Big thanks to E1M1 Magazine for sending me this copy. I really appreciate it. Keep up the good work in spreading the gospel of boomer shooters.